What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the Not Your Quick Fix podcast. It's your girl, Kara, here with episode 127. We have another week without Kylie on the podcast. Sadly, she is very sick today, and I am actually just getting over being sick. I had a 101 fever last night, literally felt like I was in a delirium. I was like, I cannot function right now. But it's so crazy because I was just talking to, I did a corporate presentation for one of my past clients this morning, and I was telling her about how my fever broke last night and I just feel like a new person today. The human body is truly so insane. Like the way that it can just boom, flip a switch and heal itself. And immediately, as soon as that fever breaks, you're like, oh my God, I'm in a whole new body. So I am so happy that I am feeling better, that I could at least keep our episode going this week with a very special guest for you guys. This is actually a repeat guest and someone who is a wealth of knowledge, someone who I love talking to, all things business and health and fitness. This is my good friend, Joey Gass. So, welcome back to the podcast, Joey.
Hey, thanks for having me back. It is really wild about how the human body can just like adapt and heal like that. And it's also
Right?
wild how grateful you feel like mentally once you actually physically feel better. Like,
Oh my
you don't
God.
realize how good it feels to not be sick until you're sick for, a couple of days and then you start to feel better.
For
Um,
sure. For sure. Oh, I
but
feel that so much. It's like you don't know what you got until it's gone, right?
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, glad that we were able to, record this too. And
Me too.
recovering from a little bit of like nasal stuff myself here, but we're
Yeah.
here and we're doing it. But
Yes, we
really
got our
excited to
caffeine.
I know, right? We got our
Me and Joey were both like, we needed a sugar-free energy drink today.
yeah, and we might even talk about some sugar-free drinks maybe in this episode. We'll
Yeah,
see, I
yeah,
guess. But
yeah, for sure.
um yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to be on.
Love it. Love it. So, for those of you who do not know Joey, he is also a registered dietitian, online health and fitness coach. And we had him on, oh my gosh, it was back in like, I think the first 30 episodes. So, this was back in probably 2021 when we had you on, which was wild. So, it's been a long time coming. And I've known Joey since around like 2018. So, Joey, why don't you introduce yourself, kind of talk a little bit about, your journey and like who you are, what you do, how you got here?
Yeah, so I am a registered dietitian and online nutrition and fitness coach, like Kara mentioned. And yeah, we have known each other since I think 2018, which is wild, like how long it's been, and
I
how time
know.
just like flies. But um,
Seriously.
I am the owner and coach here at I Thrive Nutrition and Fitness. So I work mostly with women who want to lose body fat, lose weight, get healthier, feel more confident in the gym. And I don't want to give a full detailed run through of my story necessarily, because we have some really, I think, good topics we're going to go into.
For
But
sure, for sure.
um,
Abridged version.
yeah. Shortened version is, I grew up in a really unhealthy family for the most part. Like my parents didn't exercise regularly, they didn't eat healthy. So I grew up with a lot of unhealthy habits there, and I really watched them struggle with their weight and their health throughout my
Mhm.
whole entire life growing up. And it was when I got into college and I started gaining weight, even, the freshman 15, they say, but gaining weight in college. And I kind of realized one day that I wanted to really change things for myself and not necessarily go down the path that my parents were going through with their health.
Yeah.
So I made a change and started diving into the nutrition, the fitness, the health realm, and really fell in love with it. Had my own weight loss transformation, made a lot of really good changes, but then a lot of mistakes along the way on how I lost the
Hmm.
weight and just learned throughout that process. And then eventually ended up going to grad school, getting my dietetics degree, getting into a get an internship, becoming a registered dietitian, and starting my online business and being able to coach people from there. And now I'm really inspired to help people just feel more confident in their own skin because know how that feels to not feel that way from my own experience, and
Hmm.
really motivated to help others get healthier and lose weight and prevent health issues from occurring in the future, like my parents dealt with, because both of them have actually both passed in the past 5 years from, um, dealing with a lot of those health issues. So
Yeah.
that's kind of a brief run through of my story. Here I am now, coaching, full roster of clients, which I'm really grateful for, and
Hmm.
just continuing to grow from there.
And you became a dad in the last year,
Oh
year and a
yeah.
half?
Yeah, it's almost a year and a half. He is like 16 months old now, so
Okay.
that's been really cool too, which like a big part of me doing all this was because I saw my parents struggle with their health,
Right.
and there were physical limitations that they had when I
Hmm.
was a kid that I noticed. So a big part for me now too is I want to be as healthy as I can for as long as possible for, my son now and even like future kids that we might have down the road. And
Yeah,
I want to really help, people, especially women, moms, because they tend to put themselves on the back burner, especially their health the most,
for
but really
sure.
help them stay healthy long term for their kids too. And, lead to, or give their kids healthy habits to pass down as well. So, yeah, it's been really fun being a dad, especially as he's gotten older into like the toddler stage and
Yeah.
personality running around.
Yeah.
It's been cool.
I love that. Oh, I love that so much. And I'm just so thrilled for everything that you've accomplished over these last few years in your business and just excited to see you, continue to grow not only as a coach, but as a dad as well. It's so cool to see. So, yeah, I am super pumped to chat with you today. And I think we have a really cool episode because, I have been getting a lot of just kind of random questions lately, and a lot of them are based in nutrition misconceptions. Like a lot of people really not understanding certain things whenever it comes to nutrition and fitness. So I kind of wanted to do a little Q&A style episode with Joey today, breaking down some really common nutrition and fitness misconceptions and myths that maybe we see and hear, which again, I'm sure Joey, like you've probably heard these, all of these at one point or another, in your health and fitness coaching career. And I think that these are some of the biggest questions that we do get asked. So, just to kind of start out right out the gate, number one of the biggest questions that we get asked is, do we need to eat smaller and more frequent meals for fat loss or to boost our metabolism? Is there actually any science behind that? And why do people feel like they need to do that?
Yeah, this was something I feel like it's thankfully died down a little bit as time goes on and now like, modern day 2024, but
Yep.
back in like 2014, 2015, this was still I feel like pretty prominent of people thinking they had to eat somewhere around like 5 to 7 meals per day in
Yep.
order to boost their metabolism or keep their metabolic rate going and everything. But that's really not true. And I think it's based off of a couple of things. One being a lot of these recommendations of eating that often per day have come from bodybuilders who need a lot of calories in order to gain muscle or maintain their body weight or muscle mass, whether it's because they're just huge individuals in general, or maybe they're taking some extra supplements and they're not
Hmm.
natural, and that's causing them to, need more of this fuel. But
For sure.
they need a higher amount of calories per day. So because of that, it's really hard to get 4,000 calories in a day from only eating like 3 times a day. So I think that's
Right.
one reason why this kind of myth came about is because of people needing those smaller meals in order to add up to like, 4,000 calories per day to actually put on muscle from these bodybuilders. I
Hmm.
think another reason why this kind of myth came about is because of looking at more short-term changes in energy expenditure or calories burned. And what I
Hmm.
mean by short-term is looking at, okay, how many calories are you burning in like a 4 hour period or a 5 hour period versus like a 24-hour period? And if
Hmm.
you look at studies and they examine how many calories you're burning in like a 5 hour period, and let's say you're having 2 or 3 meals in that period versus just one, in that 5 hour period, you're probably going to burn more calories having 2 or 3 meals because of the thermic effect of food, which is basically your body burning calories in order to digest and absorb the food you're eating.
Yep.
So if you don't eat in a 5 hour window, your body might burn, let's say, 400 calories in that 5 hour window. But if you eat, let's say, 2 meals, your body might burn 550 or 600 calories in that window because it
Hmm.
needs that energy to digest that food. But the thing with this is that that thermic effect is based off of the total amount of food you're eating in a 24-hour period.
Right.
So if you're eating the same amount of calories total throughout the day, it doesn't matter as far as the thermic effect with it boosting your metabolism as long as calories are equal at the end of the day. So
Yeah.
when you really examine it that way, like the more frequent meals, it really doesn't matter, and it doesn't boost your metabolism more than having, a couple of meals in a day.
Yep, I think that that is something that's so misunderstood is understanding that it truly doesn't matter if we are eating the same amount of calories in a day and if those calories are broken up similarly between protein, complex carbohydrates, fat, everything of that sort, because we know that protein does have the highest thermic effect of food, followed by those, fibers and fibrous carbohydrates. But it's really important to understand too that I think we can get so caught up in putting the cart before the horse, right? And we're like, oh, let me eat 5 to 6 small meals a day or whatever it may be. When in reality, we might not even be eating the proper amount of calories to begin with, right? So that's really where we need to start with things and understanding that, okay, if you are somebody who does better with eating 5 to 6 small meals a day, totally fine. If you're somebody who does better with eating 3 large meals a day and a snack, 100% fine, right? It's really not going to make that big of a difference as long as you're consuming that same amount of calories throughout, that span of 24 hours. And I'm so happy you brought up just kind of like that calorie balance and the thermic effect of food because yes, while thermic effect of food obviously does play a role in energy expenditure, it doesn't make up a huge component of our daily calorie expenditure, right? Like there's so many other things that play a much bigger role into that.
Right. And it's all relative too to how many calories you're eating too. Like that thermic effect.
Yep.
If you're eating 2,000 calories in a day, but one person's doing it in 4 meals and one person's doing it in 2 meals, the person who's doing it in 4 meals might have a little bit more of a thermic effect that is more frequent, I guess, because they're having more frequent meals, but it's going to
Hmm.
be to a lesser extent because they're eating only 400 calories at a time versus a large amount versus the person who's eating 2 meals a day they aren't going to have that boost in energy expenditure as often from the thermic effect, but the thermic effect when they do eat, because they're eating 1,000 calories at a time, is going to be greater. So it's all going to kind of equal out at the end.
Yep.
And so, like when you're choosing how many meals to have, do it off of what's practical for you
Hmm.
and what allows you to actually hit your total calories, protein, all those nutrients total throughout the day
Yep.
versus, like you said, missing the forest for the trees or trying to pick up, like missing dollars to pick up pennies or whatever, and trying to focus on those minuscule details that don't matter.
100%. And I think that that's going to be a theme throughout a lot of these questions as well as missing the forest for the trees, right? So
Yeah, probably.
for sure, for sure. Okay, question number two. And this kind of combines two different questions, but can the scale stay the same whenever I am gaining muscle? And how much muscle is realistic to gain in a 6 month to 1 year span of time? Which I think the answer is going to be a lot lower than what most people think.
Yeah. So I guess your first question. So can the scale stay the same while building muscle and
Hmm.
losing fat? So it is possible for that to happen, for the scale to not change, but your body composition to change. I'm sure you've seen it a lot in clients when they get started. I
Yep.
see it a lot when clients get started. Um, but it only happens in a few different scenarios. One being that you're very new to lifting, so your body's not really adapted to the stimulus of lifting and you don't really have that much muscle mass on your frame yet. When you're providing the body with that new stimulus, it's going to grow muscle pretty quickly and it can grow muscle, maybe not at the rate that you're losing fat, but close to it. So you don't see that much change in the scale.
Hmm.
Um, so that's one scenario if you're very new to lifting. Another scenario is maybe if you are very new to eating a high protein diet, so your body's not used to getting that protein for recovery. Now you're getting in all this protein where you're going to be able to grow a little bit more muscle too. So
Yep.
that rate can be similar to the rate that you're losing fat. So that's
Yep.
another scenario. Another scenario where you could gain muscle and lose fat at pretty much the same rate would be if you previously had gained muscle in the past, but let's say you stopped working out for a consistent period of time, or maybe you suffered an injury, so you stepped away from the gym and you lost a little bit of that muscle that you previously had. Once you get back to the gym and you get back to lifting consistently, you're going to grow that muscle back pretty quickly, actually a lot quicker than what it took you to initially grow it. So
Hmm.
that could be another scenario is when you've taken a long kind of hiatus from the gym and you're getting back to it. And then I think the last scenario would be if you are taking some kind of drugs, like you're not natural and taking steroids or
Yep.
anabolics, like that could be a fourth scenario where you could potentially be gaining muscle at the same rate that you're losing fat. But
Yeah.
they
And
usually only, yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, and I do feel like with the, body recomposition discussion, I do feel like at times I tend to see this happening in slightly leaner individuals who don't have as much body fat to lose. A lot of times we are going to maybe see a bit more body recomposition where the scale stays the same versus somebody who maybe has a bit more body fat to lose. Normally, we're going to see that scale drop a little bit more whenever we're seeing those body composition changes.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's all relative to how much extra body fat you have on your frame, right? So
Right.
if you're somebody who, to get to a healthy body fat percentage, you have 50 pounds to lose, right? That's a big portion of body fat you could be losing per week versus somebody who, you're already at a healthy body composition or, yeah, body fat
Hmm.
level, but you just want
Yep.
to maybe get a little bit leaner. Like you might only have theoretically 5 to 10 pounds that you actually could really lose in the healthy range. So it's just a smaller percentage. So because of that, you're going to see less actual fat loss per week, which could you're more likely to line up with the extra muscle gain in poundage
Yeah.
that you're gaining per week too.
For sure, for sure. And so, okay, what can we realistically expect within 1 year?
Yeah. So like you said, this is probably going to be very disappointing for a lot of people. Um, But it's also dependent on a variety of factors, right? Genetics play a big role.
For
Sex
sure.
or gender plays a big role too.
Mm-hmm.
Men are going to be more likely to probably build muscle quicker than most women. Not always, like genetics play a role too. There are some women who like really put on muscle easily and men who don't, but
Yep.
for the most part on average. Consistency, obviously, with your lifting, like if you're inconsistent, only lifting maybe 1 day a week here, maybe 3 days a week here, and back and forth versus somebody who's working out 4 days consistently.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to play a big role. Nutrition, obviously, if you're in a calorie deficit, in a surplus, or eating at maintenance, if you're eating enough protein, having the proper programming, sleep, stress, all that stuff. So, all that stuff obviously plays a role.
Mm-hmm.
But when we're looking at, let's say, if you have all those things pretty much dialed in, um, if you're a noob, probably in your first year of lifting, it's realistic to maybe gain anywhere from 1 to 2 pounds of muscle per month, probably.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that would be like at the max, probably around 25 pounds of muscle in a year. If you're eating in a surplus, you're training properly and everything. And that's for somebody who's probably pretty genetically gifted, gaining
Mm-hmm.
25 pounds of
That's
muscle
a
in a year.
lot of muscle in a year. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's a lot of muscle, honestly, even in like
No matter what.
a lifetime. Like, and
Yeah.
not, and I don't mean you have 25 pounds of muscle total on your frame, but 25 plus the amount you naturally just have.
Right.
Like 25 pounds of extra muscle that your body actually doesn't need to survive, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot, which means maybe you have actually, 35 or 40 pounds of total muscle on your frame.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that's probably realistic for your first year of doing those things consistently right. And
Mm-hmm.
you're a noob, probably anywhere from 12 to 24, 12 to 25 pounds per um per year
Yep.
gained. Past the first year, you're probably looking at more like 5 to 15 pounds in that kind of wider range. And obviously, that's a pretty wide range, but it's dependent mostly on like those variables I mentioned plus genetics. Once you get past like the first couple of years of training and you're in like year 2, 3, and 4, it's like if you can gain 5 pounds of muscle in a year, that's actually like really, really good.
Yeah.
Actually, extremely good. Like, I mean, you probably talk to a lot of natural bodybuilders or physique competitors or whatever. And if they step on stage and they're a few pounds heavier the next year they compete, but at the same body fat percentage, like that's a huge win for them. Like to
For
gain
sure.
3 pounds of actual muscle mass in that time frame.
Yeah.
Um, and after like year 4, once you get in year 5, it's like you might put on maybe 5 pounds of muscle. A year, and that's like spending most of the time in a surplus and really doing everything right and having all
Mm-hmm.
your boxes checked off. So it just, as time goes on, that number gets smaller and smaller and smaller.
Yes, which is, again, I think that's why people get so frustrated. And also, a reminder to everybody listening who does want to build muscle, like Joey said, this is spending a large amount of time eating at maintenance or in a surplus, right? Not dieting, not chronically cutting calories, which is really important to understand. And same goes with weight loss as well. The more and more that you diet, the more that you go into a fat loss phase, the harder it is. Like, again, like the further and further that you get into this health and fitness journey, the more easily your body can adapt, right? And so I think that's where people get really frustrated as well. That's why we do see so many of those newbie gains. I mean, God, and this will kind of tie into our next question about reverse dieting, but I remember my working with my very first coach and I dropped 30 pounds like that while I was reverse dieting, you know? And so, and it's like now I reverse diet and I gain weight, you know? And so it's just, again, understanding the differences in the way that the body adapts and also like how much consistency you actually have to have the further and further and further you get into this journey. Super important.
Yeah, I think a big thing you mentioned too that is really important is just like the surplus and maintenance
Yep.
versus being in a deficit. Because like a lot of people have this idea that if they just like do everything, like train hard and eat nutritious foods, that their body is just gonna like keep gaining small amounts of muscle forever. But once you get to a certain point, especially after the newbie gain phase, like if you're not at least eating at maintenance, and probably even like even at maintenance, you're not going to gain much muscle after the newbie phase. But if you're not at least in a small surplus, like it doesn't have to be something huge, you don't have to gain, 5 pounds a month or something crazy. But if you're not in somewhat of a surplus, it's going to be very hard to actually continue to build muscle. And that's
Mhm.
okay if you want to just like maintain the muscle you have, be healthy, work out, all that stuff. But if you like really want your glutes to grow and you've been lifting for a couple of years, continuously eating in a deficit or even just staying at maintenance all the time, like you are sacrificing for sure some muscle growth you could have. And these
Right.
numbers are going to be even lower than that if you're not pushing at least somewhat of a surplus.
Yeah, 100%. So, question number three, really common question I get asked is why do I lose weight in a reverse diet? Or how could I lose weight in a reverse diet? Like, how does that happen for some people where other people might gain or maintain?
Yeah, so this is a really good question. So there's a couple of things we have to think about and a couple of reasons why somebody might lose weight in a reverse diet. Number one is that where you started your reverse diet at, you were already in a deficit and maybe you didn't know, or maybe you weren't logging correctly at first or whatever.
Yep.
But like if somebody starts their reverse diet at 1400 calories and they're reversing up to 2000 and their maintenance is actually 2000, like, and they actually start being consistent. Okay, I'm actually consistently eating 1500 and then I'm consistently eating 1600 the next week, and slowly you're still in a deficit. So that's why you end up losing weight in a reverse. I think sometimes people think they think they're eating 1400 to start and they're not losing weight, and a lot of times it's like inaccuracies in tracking, or maybe they're not
Yes.
consistently eating 1400 and they're like, well, I was eating 1400 not losing weight, and now I started eating 1600 and now I'm losing weight. Like
Yep.
my metabolism must be really ramping up, which, there are, aspects of our metabolism increasing as we eat more food, but sometimes it's just simply you started tracking more accurately and you actually were consistent with those numbers. So that's why you see that weight loss in a reverse diet. So that's one way.
Yeah,
Go
and
ahead.
I will say too, a lot of times with that inaccuracy in tracking also comes them eating maybe 1200 to 1400 calories Monday through Thursday, and then Friday through Sunday they're blowing it out of the water like 2500 plus calories, right? So
Yeah.
again, we have to take that into consideration too.
Right. It's like, what are you doing consistently? And
Right.
so yeah, that's one aspect. Two is your non-exercise activity thermogenesis increases. So you've probably talked about this multiple times on your podcast, I'm sure,
Mhm.
but stands for, or NEAT stands for this. So it's basically all this like subconscious activity you do and not even realizing it. So like I'm talking with my hands right now. If you're somebody who's like very fidgety when you're sitting at your desk and doing work or whatever, those things that you don't even think about increase as you start to eat more food. So
Yep.
that could potentially cause your metabolism or energy expenditure to go up as you eat a little bit more food, which could contribute to you maybe losing weight while reverse dieting and calories coming up.
For sure.
So that's one aspect. Another could be your activity expenditure increases too.
Yep.
So if you're somebody who you've been under eating or eating a low amount of food and you work out maybe 3 or 4 days a week, but your workouts they kind of suck. Like you don't feel that strong during that. Your energy isn't very high. You're kind of just going through the motions, picking up weights and just kind of repping them out and then stopping, not really pushing yourself, going to failure or feeling strong in those lifts. But you start eating a couple hundred or a few hundred calories more, then you might actually start burning a little bit more calories in those workouts because you have more fuel to put towards them, which
Mhm.
then can increase a little bit of the calorie burn during your workouts. And if you're pushing yourself more in your workouts, getting closer to failure, then your body needs more resources to recover from those workouts too. So overall, it kind of, in a sense, raises your thermic effect a little bit or your metabolism a little bit at all times, just like working out a little bit harder. Um,
Yes.
so that's one other aspect. Another aspect is stress. So when you're eating a low amount of food, your body kind of senses, oh, it's in this stressful state. Then what comes along with stress a lot of times is extra water retention.
Hmm.
So you could be eating 1,400 calories a day and like you should be burning 2,000, but maybe not seeing changes on the scale because your body's in this stress state holding on to extra water, but you're still losing fat, but you're just holding on to extra water that's hiding that. Then you start to increase carbs or increase calories a little bit, and now you're eating 1,600 or 1,700 calories and your body doesn't feel as stressed anymore. So you hold on to less water potentially because of that stress reduction. And then all of a sudden the scale goes down and you're like, oh man, my metabolism must be like on fire
On
now, like
fire.
burning. Yeah, right. It's
Yeah.
now it's actually turned on. Before it was turned off, but now it's turned on. And now
Yeah.
I'm burning a lot more and losing a bunch of fat when really you were still losing that fat eating 1,400. It was just masked by the water you were holding on to. And now that water weight is kind of coming down.
Yeah.
Um, and kind of the last point as to how this could happen is kind of revolves around stress and a little bit what we were talking about with how much are you actually eating. But
Right.
with lower stress in general from eating a little bit more food, you're going to feel less hunger and you're
Hmm.
probably going to follow the plan more. If I tried to
For
stick
sure.
with, 1,200 calories during the week, I'm probably going to binge and eat a shit ton of calories later on in the weekend. But
Right.
if I aim for 2,000 calories a day, I'm going to be consistent with that and probably be able to stay consistent with that. I mean, 2,000 for me would be low, but just like for the listener,
Hmm.
uh, they could be able to stick with that for the whole weekend and actually follow through with it. So that causes more adherence or more following through with the plan. So you see the weight loss there. So those are kind of the five ways that people would actually see weight loss or fat loss during a reverse diet.
Yep. That was such a perfect breakdown. And just like an extra one that I feel like can be an additive, helpful layer. It might not be a direct cause of this weight loss, but is improved thyroid function whenever we are reverse dieting as well, right? Especially if you're somebody who's going from a lower carb diet to then increasing more carbohydrates. We also know that carbohydrates help with active thyroid hormone conversion. And that active thyroid hormone, T3, that is really kind of that master metabolic regulator, right? Like that's what's helping to improve metabolic rate. So it might not be a direct, like, hey, this could be a reason why I'm losing body fat, but it definitely, I would say, is an additive layer that probably only helps in the long run, right? But yeah, that was such a good breakdown. I literally just had this exact conversation with a client the other day because she's one of my miracle clients. It's like she's only been with me since December and we've been reverse dieting this whole time and she's down almost 25 pounds. And I'm like, we just love to see this. But again, really important for all of my people out there who are reverse dieting. Weight loss is not the goal in a reverse diet. And it is very, very okay if you maintain weight or even gain a little bit of weight as well. Because again, the goal of a reverse diet is to get you to a better place to be able to enter into fat loss. It's not necessarily to lose fat itself, which is super important to remember.
Right. And I'm glad you brought up the thyroid point because I forgot to mention that. But yeah, though like the thyroid and even all these other reasons like increased
Hmm.
need, increased activity from your workouts, like those things aren't going to like if one of those things increases, it's probably not going to cause you to like still lose weight or lose fat. It's like each one of those contributes a little bit and might,
Right.
contribute to that scenario. But like you said, the goal of a reverse diet isn't hey, we're going to reverse diet. So your metabolism is going to be now like stoked and on fire. And now you're going to like burn all this bunch of body fat. The point of a reverse diet is to just get your calories up and get your body to a better spot, to respond to fat loss long term and to a healthier spot. It's not necessarily to see a fat loss result from the reverse diet.
Yes, 100%. So, okay, I'm going to kind of switch our order here a little bit because I think this will be a great question to ask afterward. But what, like, in terms of metabolic adaptation, can metabolic adaptation be reversed while reversing calories, which we kind of just talked about. But I would love for you to kind of talk about metabolic adaptation in the opposite way of like some of the negative adaptations that we can see happen when we are dieting. And we pretty much just walk through why reverse dieting helps that.
Yeah, so man, there's like so many rabbit holes we could go into with
Yeah,
metabolic adaptation. I love reading about it. I feel like it's so interesting.
it
But
is.
so I guess metabolic adaptation, like I guess first maybe talking about what causes it is important. So
Yes.
metabolic adaptation is typically caused by like three different things. Usually it's a loss of lean body mass, whether that be from muscle mass or even like something that people don't really think about is like organ mass. Sometimes when you're dieting for a long period of time, your actually organs get a little bit smaller, and that can
Hmm.
cause a little bit of metabolic adaptation too. So just overall loss of lean mass in general, but also loss of body fat. If your body fat ends up getting um, too low or maybe too low for you individually, which is maybe something I'll talk about too, but your
Yeah.
body fat level getting low can cause metabolic adaptation. And then also your calories being low. So there's kind of three different things that can cause metabolic adaptation. And when it comes to metabolic adaptation as well, some people describe it as the reduction in your basal metabolic rate or
Hmm.
your BMR, which is basically how many calories you burn at rest.
Hmm.
And then some people describe it as the reduction in how many calories you burn total, like your total daily energy expenditure. And those are kind of two different things too. Um, but it's typically when the predicted energy expenditure from either the RMR or the total daily energy expenditure is lower, or the predicted is higher than what you're actually burning. So you're actually burning less than what we think you should burn
Hmm.
based off of these equations and, where your body weight is at and stuff. So it's like if somebody were to lose 50 pounds and you put their stuff into a calculator and it says, okay, they should be burning 2,000 calories per day at
Hmm.
their new body weight, but they're actually only burning 1,750 or 1,800. That's kind of like metabolic adaptation, is that because they've lost all this body fat and they've eaten a lower calorie and maybe lost lean mass,
Hmm.
their energy expenditure is lower than what we would think it should be. So that's kind of like, I guess, a definition and what kind of causes metabolic adaptation. Um, and what was your question, I guess?
So, in terms of, I guess a question that I got was, with metabolic adaptation, it was one, understanding it, which you did a great job of breaking it down. But then two, you know, can reversing calories improve metabolic adaptation? So basically, we are seeing a lot of these negative, quote unquote, negative adaptations happening whenever we reverse dieting. So essentially, yes, reversing calories will reverse that metabolic adaptation to a certain extent. Um, I'm curious your thoughts on like being able to ever like after a fat loss phase, being able to regain like full function, like hormonally, be at the same metabolic standpoint as you were prior. I think that sometimes people think like, hey, I started out around like 20 2,300 calories and then I went into a fat loss phase, I lost 50 pounds. Sometimes I think people are like, well, I should be able to get back up to 2,300 calories and maintain, but sometimes we can't always do that, right? Because we might be at a lower set point. So I think maybe even talking through that and just helping us understand, okay, why does reverse dieting help with metabolic adaptation?
Yeah, so really great question. So when it comes to metabolic adaptation and like bringing your calories up, and if we can to get to that same exact point we were at before, some people may be able to, but a lot of people can't get exactly up to there. And it's for a couple of reasons. One, probably the biggest reason is that your body's just smaller. Like a big part of how many calories you burn is just how much mass you have on your body. So if you lose 50 pounds, that's 50 pounds of less mass that you're carrying around at all times. So your body's just burning a little bit less at rest, no matter what you do. So,
Yep.
like, if you normally would eat, like you said, I think 2,300, once you lose 50 pounds, you might only be able to eat 2,100 and maintain your weight now because you've lost all that weight.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes this metabolic adaptation is even a little bit stronger where like you actually burn only 1,900 and it actually is more than what is predicted based on your new weight. That's kind of what we talked about with metabolic adaptation. Um,
Yep.
I've been reading a lot about too, this kind of aspect of there's like an upper like threshold limit and a lower threshold limit for a lot of people when it comes to the amount of body fat that they have on their body. So
Yeah.
some like people probably know the term a little bit better of like your body fat set point. They probably
Yes.
heard that at some point, but there's usually a range, and some people's range might be okay, they comfortably hold body fat at between 20 and 25% body fat. Like anywhere in that range, their body
Yep.
kind of comfortably holds on to that, and they don't experience metabolic adaptation that much if they're in that
Hmm.
range or at all. And they're able to reverse metabolic adaptation maybe completely as long as they're in that range. Some people, their lower threshold limit might be 25% body fat and their
Yeah.
upper might be 30. And if they get to like 22% body fat, lower than that level, even if they're eating a good amount of food because their body fat is lower than that lower threshold limit, they're gonna maybe experience some of those symptoms of their metabolism being a little bit slower than predicted. They might even have a little bit more hunger that's trying to naturally drive them back in their happy range. So that individually can make a big impact on if the reverse diet, I guess, effectively reverses metabolic adaptation, as if they are in that like lower to upper threshold limit or in that body fat set point range or not. So that like
Yeah,
plays a big role there too.
for sure.
Um, and also, I don't know if you've uh looked into or read about like different phenotypes when it comes to
Hmm.
like metabolism with like a thrifty phenotype versus a spendthrift, I believe it's what it's called.
Oh, I've
Um,
never heard of this.
yeah.
No.
So a thrifty metabolic phenotype is basically where the person's metabolism, like if you bring calories down or go into a fat loss phase, will adapt very quickly on the low end. So if you
Okay,
bring,
okay.
yeah.
So like
So if
adaptive versus okay, that makes
yeah, kind of
total sense.
adaptive
Yep.
versus not adaptive.
Yep.
But what's interesting is like these thrifty phenotype people, sometimes it's very adaptive on the low end. So if you bring calories down, it adapts really well. So
Yeah.
like you think someone would be in a 500 calorie deficit if you brought their calories down by 500, but they might actually only be in like a couple hundred, and you have to bring their calories a lot lower than what you would expect because
Uh-huh.
of that. But it doesn't necessarily always adapt to the high end. So like they
Right.
can go into a surplus really easily and gain weight, but going into a deficit, they like really feel, or you have to really dig to like lose body fat.
Yes.
Yeah, so
That's
that
so
would,
interesting. Okay, so I've heard of this. I just know it as a different terminology than thrifty, which is so funny.
yeah. So thrifty would be that, and then spendthrift would be somebody whose metabolism actually adjusts a little bit better on the high end. So if they go
Yep.
into a surplus, it doesn't actually turn into a surplus as well. But when they go into a deficit, their body doesn't actually adapt on the lower end as much, which is like good because you don't want it to adapt to the lower
Right.
calories, right?
Right.
Um, but what's interesting is like the people who are thrifty versus spendthrift, the people who are thrifty, who their metabolism adapts to the low end, they actually tend to have a higher metabolic rate at baseline versus the spendthrift one. So even
Hmm.
though they like the spendthrift are at a disadvantage because their metabolism adapts to the low end easier, they actually can eat a little bit more than the spendthrift type at maintenance. So it's just really interesting the individual differences with that to where like the thrifty person probably needs maybe a reverse diet a little bit more versus the spendthrift, since the spendthrift doesn't adapt to that lower intake as much.
Right. Right. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Just the entire process of metabolic adaptation and the way that certain people adapt is so interesting to me. And I think that's also where just the individuality of what we do comes into play so much. And also why it's so important not to compare your own rate of weight loss or fat loss or whatever it may be to anyone else's, right? Because you don't know what kind of, metabolic adaptation they are dealing with. Also, whenever it comes to their lifestyle, their history, everything of that sort, right? So, yeah, so, so interesting.
Well, and also too, it like this is so fascinating, and we're only touching on the one side of the equation of how many calories are burned. We're not even touching
Right.
on the effect hunger can be individually different between people when you bring
Hmm.
calories down or increase calories, which then can play a
Yep.
role because you might be a thrifty person where, let's say, you have to bring your calories a lot lower than what you think to actually see the phallus you want. But if
Yep.
your hunger doesn't increase in proportion to that, it doesn't matter that much because you're not hungry and you don't
Yeah,
care if you're
right,
eating low calories, right? But
right,
somebody else who experiences higher hunger, it might be more of an issue. So
for sure.
um, that can play a big role. So I think like somebody who's quote unquote thrifty, like I described, they probably would benefit from a reverse diet more, but they also would probably benefit from having like diet breaks and things in there more just because they have to dig deeper to actually get the 500 calorie deficit or the
Right,
stereotypical 1 pound of fat loss per week deficit that they need versus
right.
somebody else.
Yep,
So yeah, it's very individual, which is why like, we give recommendations and stuff in podcasts and everything, but like unless you're working with somebody and like actually adjusting and seeing these things and learning with
yep.
people, um, makes a big difference. Like I've had this client and she can eat like 20 like 2600 calories a day and like not gain weight. But if we go into a fat loss phase, we have to go down to like 17 to 1600. And
Yep.
it's like we bring
Yep.
your calories down to 2000, still stays the same. And it's like
Yep.
that's not what you would typically expect and not everyone is like that, but there are some people where their metabolism just really adjusts, to the opposite direction.
And there are some people out there who really have like that quote unquote inflated maintenance calorie level where it's like their maintenance is just such a wide range, right? And it's like you do have to push lower. And it sounds like, that's a situation like with your client. And I've had clients like that as well. And again, I think this also harps back to the importance of working with a coach one-on-one, right? Because like if you are not somebody who is well versed in this and who it has experience in working with these things and making these adjustments, you're not going to know how to make these adjustments for yourself, whether you do need to push more, whether you do need a diet break, a refeed, whatever it may be, if you're trying to do this on your own.
Yeah. And can I just say something else too that's been kind of on my
Yeah.
mind a little bit? So I
Yeah.
know one of like the potential questions, and you might have been getting to this, was how low should calories get in a dieting phase? And
Yes. 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 Yes.
this is something that like always kind of rubs me the wrong way or gets to me when I see coaches out there putting stuff out like, oh, like all of my clients eat over 2000 calories a day and
Yep.
consistently losing weight.
Yep.
Because I think it's frustrating if you're somebody who is genuinely tracking their food and really
Hmm.
eating 2000 calories a day and you're not losing weight, or if you
Hmm.
have to eat 1500 to lose weight and you feel like, am I doing something wrong? Like,
Yeah.
am I
I
harming
gotta
my
push,
body
I
because
gotta
I'm
push 1300, 1350 calories whenever I'm in a
right?
fat loss phase.
Yeah.
Like,
And it's just everyone's so individual, and how low your calories should get is dependent on like your individual metabolism, like those phenotypes and all that stuff we just talked about. Also, even just your general body frame. Like, what are you, 5 foot,
I'm
right?
5 foot. Yep. So I'm
5 foot.
short. Yeah.
So you're short, you're smaller person, like you're gonna have to dig deeper than what people think is sustainable, right? Like people throw out the 1200 calorie number of like, oh, that's the recommended intake of a toddler. So you should never go that low, which I don't know if I've ever had a client eat 1200. So don't think I'm advocating for eating 1200, but like you
Agreed.
said you had to get down to like 1350 or something. So that, I mean,
Yeah.
that's pretty close to 1200, right? And
Right.
it's just like putting those blanket statements out there of, oh, if you hit 1200, you're eating the intake of a toddler, you're stupid, you shouldn't do that. I think we need to be careful as coaches of putting that stuff out there. Um,
Hmm.
and like, if we're going to get technical, 1200 calories for a toddler is a surplus because they're growing versus you're trying
Right.
to be in a
Right.
deficit. You're trying not to grow. So you're kind of comparing like apples to oranges a little bit. I
Yeah.
mean, like I said, I don't recommend 1200 calories to really anybody, but like,
No.
we just gotta stop saying things in such black and white I don't
I
know, terminology, I
agree.
guess.
I agree. And something that my own coach and mentor has also taught me too, it's like I think for a really long time, I was very scared to push clients past a certain calorie point because I do think there was this huge boom of like, oh my gosh, you're eating 1200 calories. Like you can't be doing that. And I think, of course, like, and I mean, I've even said that before, you know what I mean? Like 1200 calories is a low amount, of course, but we're talking about that in the sense of there are so many women out there who are literally just living their entire life eating 1200 calories a day and thinking that's a maintenance calorie level, which it's not. There's a very big difference between thinking that 1200 calories is your maintenance versus having to push to 1200 calories, depending on where your metabolism's at, how short you are, what your frame is at, all of that kind of stuff at the end of a fat loss phase. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I think that's so huge and just like not making blanket statements like that and understanding the context, of course, always is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. And doing it under the guidance of, like a professional who's going to make sure, oh, you're not going to eat 1200 for months and months and months on end. Like we're going to do it in a strategic way if we ever push that low
Yep.
and, make sure we bring calories up high like pretty quickly and all that stuff. So,
100%. 100%. So, okay, taking a little bit of a different turn here, we're going to talk about diet soda for a second. Is diet soda really bad for you? Should we be avoiding it? All of the zealots out there who are like, if you're going to drink a diet soda, you should just drink a regular soda. Like, I'm sorry, but you will not catch me drinking a regular root beer, but I will have a diet root beer all day long.
yeah. So it's funny because we were just showing our energy drinks that we were drinking. And I don't know if yours has like artificial sweetener, but I know mine has.
It
But
definitely has sucralose in it.
yeah, so like, um, I mean, it, you're okay with me like cussing. I think I've already cussed a
Oh,
couple
yeah.
times
Oh, my
already,
God.
but
Yeah.
I don't know. This just like this whole conversation is just gets me to like the diet soda thing. Like
Yes.
there's always like you go to a holiday party or you meet up with family. Maybe it's Easter weekend even or whatever, and
Oh, yeah.
you're sitting down at the table and there's this like uncle or cousin that's like distant that you don't even really talk to that much, and you try to avoid because they're just so arrogant and think they know everything, and like you pull out a diet soda and they're like, "Oh, it's worse than regular soda." It's like, shut the fuck up. No, it's not.
Seriously.
It is not worse than regular soda. Like that thing irritates me so much because, and people kind of say this for a couple of reasons. One is like they think it causes cancer and all these other types of issues like that. But it's like the research that is based on that is from usually rat studies where they're given this like crazy huge amount of
Huge
artificial
amount.
sweetener.
Keywords. Huge
Yeah,
amount.
like enormous to where like the recommendation for like artificial sweeteners, and it's different depending on which one you look at, but in general, is something around like you could have 50 Diet Cokes a day, and like that's what you would need to actually drink the or the like max amount that's recommended as safe for humans. And that max amount that's recommended is actually like decreased by I think it's like tenfold to where like they take the amount that's seen in rats per kilogram of how much the rat weighs, and they actually see, okay, this is causing some kind of negative side effect in rats potentially. And they decrease that number by even like tenfold and say, okay, that's the recommended max amount for humans, just to be like
Yep.
on the
Just
quadruple
be
safe
really
side.
safe.
Yeah.
Yes.
So like even if you have 50 Diet Cokes a day, I don't know if it's 50, but it's somewhere up there close to that. And it's like you're still not going to probably surpass what's actually safe for humans. Now, I don't recommend drinking that much Diet Coke per day, but
No.
um you're probably
But
going to
if,
miss out on a lot of other things if you
right,
do.
right.
Um, but like having one Diet Coke a day even is not bad. And you have to also think, what is the alternative if you don't drink a Diet Coke per day? Is it you're just drinking water and your calorie intake the rest of the time stays the exact same? Then okay, maybe drink water a little bit more. But is the alternative for you drinking a regular soda or
Right.
filling in that like sweet taste with cookies and other stuff that isn't necessarily bad in itself, but if it pushes you to eat a few hundred calories or drink a few hundred calories more than your maintenance level and you end up slowly gaining weight over time, we know the direct effects of having like an excessive amount of body fat on your frame for a long period of time.
Yep.
Like that is clear.
Yes.
So like this small chance of, which is pretty much zero, of you having cancer from drinking diet soda because you're having so little, if it's just one a day or one every other day versus the clear effects of replacing that with a regular soda and getting all that extra calories that don't fill us up, that probably turns into a surplus, which probably turns into, multiple pounds of fat gained, over a long time span. That's much more detrimental to your health than a diet soda. And
Mhm.
there's studies that look at like people who like randomized controlled trials where they give someone diet soda versus regular and they lose weight. Now, correlational studies sometimes shows people who drink a lot of diet soda actually are heavier, but that's because people who are heavier purposely drink diet soda because it's so low calories, and that's a correlational thing, not a causational thing.
Right. I think we're going back to our undergrad here. Correlation does not equal causation, right? So, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head with that one. I don't really have any notes. And I think it's just really important to remember that, again, if having a diet soda daily is stopping you from having a regular soda with 30 grams of added sugar and creating that, potential calorie surplus for yourself, have the diet soda, right? Like, again, we're not here to demonize foods. We're not here to say foods are good and bad. And again, it's about what we're doing with our diet the majority of the time. And we're looking at, okay, if I'm having a diet soda amongst an otherwise nutrient dense diet, probably not going to do much harm, right? So
Yeah.
that's super, super important. So, okay, this leads into another kind of, nutrition gimmick, I will say, that people love to get you on is net carbs. What are net carbs and why should I be tracking total carbs versus net carbs?
Yeah. So net carbs versus total carbs are basically total carbs are the total amount of carbohydrates that you're eating, and
Yep.
that it's including fiber. Net
Hmm.
carbs is basically all the carbs you're eating, taking away the carbs that are coming from fiber. And
Hmm.
the reason why there's this difference is because um, carbohydrates from fiber, we don't really digest and absorb all of them fully. So they're non-digestible from, the human body. And that's why. So people are like, oh, if you're, eating 80 grams of carbs, but 20 of them are coming from fiber, you're actually only getting calories from 60 of them. But
Yeah.
the thing is that I don't know. I would love to hear your take on this, honestly, of what you have clients do. But for general, like fat loss and weight loss, I recommend still like counting your total carbs and everything because
I agree.
some of those carbs coming from fiber can still be what's called like fermented or basically digested by bacteria in the colon,
Yep.
which then can be turned into short chain fatty acids, which can be used from the body as energy. So they can contribute to like calories that you're actually absorbing in the end. So we're not
Hmm.
digesting the fiber directly, but maybe indirectly from those ways. And also too, like our bodies can also, when we're in a fat loss phase and a diet, can get a little bit more efficient with extracting calories from sources too. So if like we're going to a fat loss phase, maybe we're actually are digesting and absorbing a little bit more of those carbs from fiber. And also too, it's not much of a difference in your calorie intake if you do include it versus not. Like if you're getting 25 grams of fiber per day, which is the general recommendation for women, and let's say all of those grams of fiber, you're getting the full 4 calories per gram, from carbohydrates.
Hmm.
It's only a 100 calorie difference.
Right.
And if you're keeping your fiber intake consistent, whether you're in a fat loss phase, a maintenance phase, or surplus phase, that difference of 100 calories, which is relatively small, will be the same no matter what when you make adjustments.
Hmm.
Because you know as well as I know, like when we give calorie numbers, the numbers are important, but it's more important that like the difference between what we were eating versus now is important, right?
Yes. Yes.
So if that difference, that variable, the fiber stays the same, whether you include it in your intake or not, it won't really make a difference in that much of adjustments that we make. Um, I think the net carb versus total carb thing is a little bit more relevant for people with like who are directly trying to manage their diabetes and control blood sugar because you're tracking fiber at that point versus
Mhm.
just total carbs.
For sure. And I think it's a really important thing to look out for on like labels and everything of that sort. A lot of different health food products out there will say this only has, 3 net carbs or 5 net carbs or whatever it may be. And it's really important to understand that just because something has a minimum or a minuscule amount of net carbs doesn't necessarily always make it quote unquote healthy. But I'm kind of that same thought process as you. I still have clients track total carbohydrates because like you said, we don't always know how much of that fiber that the bot that we are consuming is able to actually be fermented and turned into short chain fatty acids or is actually being used as energy, so I always like to be on the safe side and say, hey, just track total carbohydrates. I really feel like the net carb thing, I also feel like it was like so huge in like 2018, 2019 with the boom of like health and fitness online, and like GNC was blowing up with all of their like protein bars, and now we have all of these different foods that have you know protein added to it, net carbs, whatever it may be. And the marketing is just outrageous for everything. So I feel like it's just something to be aware of, and understanding what it means is really, really helpful. But just know, I mean, if you're looking to maybe not make things as confusing for yourself, just track total carbohydrates.
Yeah, it's going back to the same point that we mentioned in the very beginning of this. It's like trying to, skip over dollars to pick up pennies. Like you're focusing on these minuscule details that like are making such a small difference, and it will drive you crazy trying to, maneuver those things versus just tracking your total carbs and, going from there.
100%. 100%. Okay, we have two final questions. So the first one is there anything that I can do to get rid of sagging skin or cellulite? I feel like this is a very common question.
Yeah. So I think I guess let's start with like the cellulite thing of um what even like causes cellulite? Because I don't know, to know how to like fix it or get rid of it, we probably have to know why it's even there to begin with. So from my understanding, it's like cellulite is caused from like the body fat in your body isn't just floating around in space. Like you can't just like push on fat in your arm and like push it to the top of your arm and it just stay there. I mean, obviously gravity will like pull it back down, but it's just not floating around. Like there's these things called like fibrous cords that kind of hold your body fat in place,
Hmm.
almost like thinking about like your body fat is like a pillow, and there's this fibrous cord kind of wrapped around the pillow, which would be like a net wrapped around this pillow. And the net being wrapped around the pillow, or the fibrous cords around your body fat, then being wrapped tight causes like the pillow to kind of like push through those little like square sections of the like net in this example, and that's what causes like that dimple like appearance in
Hmm.
like the cellulite.
Hmm.
So that's one. It's just like how your body fat pushes against those fibrous cords, and that causes that like appearance. Another aspect of how like cellulite might be caused is like also has to do with your skin and how thin or thick your skin is. If your
Yep.
skin is really thin and your body fat is really pushed against those fibrous cords, then it's going to be more pronounced. So you're going to be able to see it more. Versus if your skin is maybe a little bit thicker naturally and genetically, then it might smooth those things out a little bit more and you don't see it as much.
Hmm.
So one aspect of that is, I guess, controllable. Like you could lose body fat, and that can maybe decrease the amount that body fat is pushing against those fibrous cords, so it's not as visible. But the other component of how thick and thin your skin is isn't really controllable. That's like genetic. So
No.
you can't really control it. Um,
Yeah.
to some extent, you can control it and get rid of it by losing a little bit of fat. Maybe even like building some muscle can help to smooth that area. But there is
Yes.
a component that is just genetic and it's just there.
Hmm.
And
Even no
I
matter
think,
how much body fat you lose at
mhm,
times, like there are
yeah,
areas where it's like I've been my leanest and I've still have cellulite in areas. And it's really, it really is something that differs from person to person, especially genetically, I think.
absolutely. And it's just one of those things where I understand like people are self-conscious about it because there are things that I'm self-conscious about too, or have been in the past. Like I was actually just recording a video not that long ago about I have this birthmark on my left kneecap, and I used to like be self-conscious about it as a kid, which is just really weird to like think about. But I would hate wearing shorts that came above my knee because it would show that birthmark, and I just like didn't want people to see it. And it's
Mhm.
not like I got bullied over it. Maybe like as a kid, because kids say funny things sometimes. Like
Yeah.
someone will be like, "Hey, what's that?" And I'm like,
Yeah.
"It's a birthmark," but like it's nothing to be self-conscious about. But I used to be. And now I'm not self-conscious about it, but I feel like sometimes cellulite to an extent is one of those things where nobody really cares about how much cellulite you have, and
Hmm.
nobody like looks at it and thinks like, oh, like that's disgusting. Like it's just
Hmm.
kind of you. And it's one of those things where, if you're maintaining a healthy body fat level and you're working out consistently, you're healthy and you're doing all the right things for your body. Like if you have a little bit of cellulite, don't obsess about trying to get rid of it, because why is it a bad thing necessarily, other than like the perception you have on it.
Right.
Um,
Right. Absolutely. I completely agree with that. And I think on like the sagging skin, kind of question as well. Again, I think there are a lot of different factors that go into that too, right? Especially if you are somebody who had a lot of body fat and then you lost a lot, there is only a certain amount of that that's in your control, right? Because it's not like whenever we're losing body fat, we are losing body fat. It's not like we are losing skin, right? So if we have extra skin, if you actually have like a large amount of extra skin, that may be something that you're like, okay, I want to get this surgically fixed or surgically removed, right? Like that's not necessarily something that we have so much control over. Now, if you're somebody who just has like a moderate amount of body fat to lose or whatever it may be, and you lose that body fat, a lot of times, like our skin is going to kind of like respond in a similar fashion. You know what I mean? We're not really going to have like a ton of loose, saggy skin. But of course, we also have to take into consideration age as well, right? Like I know I have so many women, even like you know, people like women in my family and my life who it's like they're in their, 50s, 60s, and they do notice sagging or maybe wrinkly skin at, a little bit more as they're aging. And it's like, again, this is also a natural part of getting older too. So I think there's a few different components there.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, with the saggy skin thing, like you can prevent it from just like, not like you can prevent it from not gaining that body fat in the first place, right? Like that's one, right? Because that skin
Mhm.
isn't stretched out. Two, you can kind of prevent it if you gain the body fat, but then you end up losing it in a sustainable rate and sustainable pace, but do it
Mhm.
quicker, right? If somebody who is, let's say, 100 pounds or 50 pounds overweight, if they lose the body fat within a year or two of gaining it versus somebody who's maybe maintained that body fat level for 10 years and then lost or gained it, like you're probably going to have a little bit more elastic skin still at that point because it hasn't been stretched out for that long of a period of time. But that's like before the fact, like before you decide to make this change that you could
Mhm.
prevent those things. And nobody's thinking about like as they're gaining weight, okay, I'm gaining all this weight. Like, how do I prevent the skin from stretching? Like nobody's like
Right.
thinking about that, right? Because it's not like you plan to gain the weight. It's not like you did gain that much weight on purpose, right?
Right.
So
Right.
like those are a couple of aspects we can control it. Another way we could help to prevent it is like losing it at a slower pace. Like the faster you lose it, the more likely it's going to be more kind of stretched out and saggy. But like you said, to a certain extent, you can't control it. And what gets me is I've had some people, sometimes clients who like they are trying to lose 50, doing 100 pounds and lose like a large amount of weight and they're really concerned about the saggy skin before they've even lost the weight. Like it's like a really big fear of theirs of like, am I gonna have all this saggy skin and everything and all this, which I get, like, people are self-conscious about that and they don't want it, but let's not worry about that until we actually lose the weight and get
Yeah.
down there. And then
Yeah.
we can worry about, if you do want to get it surgically removed, and then we can see, how much of it actually does rebound back versus not. But at the end of the day, if you have a lot of saggy skin, but you're 50, 100 pounds lighter and you're actually healthier and feel better overall, and can move around better, have a better quality of life, like who cares if you have that saggy skin?
Right.
I know
You got to
you,
weigh the pros and cons.
yeah, exactly.
100%. So, okay, last question. This will be a juicy one for sure. Should I be intermittent fasting if I want to lose weight?
Yeah, so I think this kind of correlates or connects with the first question we've kind of come in first full circle a little bit
We
with
are. We are.
the meal frequency thing
Yep.
of just like, does frequent meals cause more, which is so funny because it's like completely ass backwards, where before it was like the myth of you have to eat more frequently and you're going to burn more fat,
Right.
where
And now you're like,
now
oh, eat less and in a smaller time frame.
yeah, and that's gonna burn more fat. That's gonna like
Yeah.
the literally everything with regarding fitness and nutrition and all these myths, literally just
Contradicts.
yeah, like the whole carnivore and keto thing versus
Yeah.
like more fat. Like I know fat was always demonized before,
Yep.
and then
Yep.
carbs got demonized and all
Yep.
this stuff, which is just so funny. But no, you well, I wouldn't say you shouldn't be intermittent fasting, but you don't have to. Like there's
Hmm.
no inherently bigger benefit of intermittent fasting versus not. It's just about
Right.
what practically fits in your schedule. And it's like the whole intermittent fasting, when are you intermittent fasting and what are you considering intermittent fasting? Because one could consider intermittent fasting just like not eating from 9 p.m. at night to 9 a.m. in the morning, like
Right.
that's 12 hours you're technically fasting, but you're
Right.
maybe sleeping for 8 of those hours.
Yeah.
Are we considering that intermittent fasting? Are we considering only not eating from like 8 a.m. to 1 p.m. in the day, intermittent fasting? What if you eat your meal at 11 a.m. instead of 1 p.m.? Is that intermittent fasting? Like, what are we defining as intermittent fasting? Because
Hmm.
what about like your time between meals? Like if you eat at 12 p.m. in the day and then don't eat again until 6 p.m., are you intermittent fasting in the middle of the day? Like,
Right.
so it's all just like labels and definitions and stuff, but the most um probably common way is to not eat until maybe like 1 p.m. Like have your last meal at like 8 p.m. at night and then the next day not have your first meal until like 12 p.m. or 1 p.m.
Right.
And with that there's no like additional benefit to doing that versus actually eating during that time period if calories and your total calorie burn is the same. And actually if there is any benefit from like meal distribution of having more calories versus the beginning or end parts of your day, a little bit more of the research actually points to a little bit more of a benefit of having more of your calories towards the beginning of the day. It's not a
Yep.
huge benefit. It's not like going to be
And that doesn't
crazy.
mean you can't eat carbs past 8 p.m.
Yes, that's not what that means. But there is a little bit behind like us just digesting those calories a little bit more and being able to like actually utilize them a little bit more
Yeah.
versus like having a 1,000 calorie meal at 10 p.m. right before we go to bed. It's not going to be a huge difference. Total calories still matter the most, and total
Hmm.
calorie burn still matters the most. But yeah, it's another aspect of like picking up penny or skipping dollars to pick up pennies where it just
Yep.
doesn't matter.
Yep, yep. I think it's just important to note that again, there's no magical, mechanism behind intermittent fasting, right? Like if people are losing weight with intermittent fasting, it is simply because, okay, they were eating 2,000 calories in the day and now they are skipping breakfast. They're probably taking away 400 calories of that, putting them into a calorie deficit, right? As long as our calorie amount stays the same between, whether we're eating from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. or 1 p.m. to 8 p.m., not going to make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is why like I was very hesitant to bring up the like little bit of research that points to like the morning feeding, but like
No,
it's
but
so
there is
small,
research.
right?
Yes, there is
Um
research to
and
support.
And it also really gets me when like I'll see questions, and I know it's because people just like, they read what's online and they read these people who talk about all these benefits of fasting and stuff, and they think it's magical. But like people who are like post online or post comments of, if I put like a little bit of creamer in my coffee, does that break my fast? Or they're like, do I if I put like some sweet and low in my coffee or
Yep.
black coffee, does that break my fast? I'm like, it doesn't matter. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't matter. Um,
So crazy.
yeah.
Oh, the
And then
internet
you're
is a
like,
crazy place.
yeah, and you're like, how many calories are you eating? And like, I have no idea. It's
Right,
like,
right,
but you're
right.
stressing about that.
About the sweet and low in the coffee in the
Yeah,
morning.
yeah, it's crazy.
Oh my gosh. Well, Joey, this was such a great episode. I'm like, I don't even know how to write the show notes for this one because we covered so many different topics. And I really think that this is going to be a great resource just breaking down all of these nutrition misconceptions. So thank you so much for helping me do it. This was super fun.
Yeah, it was really fun. I know we were talking about like what topic to talk about in this, and it was fun to just like bounce around of like
Yeah.
multiple things. And
Yeah.
um,
Sometimes it's fun to just like not stay on one topic and just go down different rabbit holes of everything else.
yeah, no, it was cool. I appreciate you, inviting me on again. It was fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so before we go, I mean, the last time we asked you our special question of what's your favorite carb source, which I
Oh
don't even
gosh.
remember what you said last time, but I'm going to switch it up on you this time and ask you, what's your favorite fat source?
Oh, favorite fat source.
Or anything primarily containing fats.
This is a tough. So, man. So, hmm.
It is a tough one.
It is tough because I'm thinking of like, are we trying to like put a fat source out there that's generally like healthy fats
Nah, it can
or
be
or like not
whatever.
healthy but like unsaturated versus saturated or just like
It can be
anything?
whatever you want. The audience knows it's either, it's a little bit quote unquote healthier, maybe just something more indulgent for you.
Okay, so I don't know if this is technically higher percentage of calories coming from fat versus carbs, but I think it
Okay.
is like Reese's or Reese's ice cream.
Oh, yeah. I would
Like
honestly
peanut
say
butter.
absolutely peanut butter all the way. 100%. Oh, that sounds amazing. I will say it probably has a bit more. I mean, if we're thinking like of a Reese's candy, it has a few more carbs than fats, but like straight peanut
Yeah.
butter or something like that, oh, gotta have it, man. Do you have a favorite like brand of peanut butter that you love?
No, I don't know. We usually buy just Jif natural peanut butter. I
Just
like
Jif
that, but
Natural.
yeah,
I got hooked on Smucker's Natural like 2 years ago, and it's so creamy and like just like drizzles on so easily. It's my favorite now. So if you've never tried it, you got to try it. It's so good.
yeah, I'll have to try it. But if ice cream counts, like ice cream for sure is
For
probably
sure.
yeah, my favorite. I don't know. That is like one of those things where you don't typically just eat it by itself, so it's like
Right,
it's
right.
difficult,
Like
right?
you're
But
not
like
just eating like olive oil or unless you're
yeah.
eating like nuts or something like that. But
Yeah, but I don't know who would like I mean, not that nuts are bad, but they're just not like, oh, I'm really craving some nuts.
I don't
Uh
know. I'm a cat. Like I love cashews and macadamia nuts. Like I will actually crave those things. But it's so funny because I always have a funny story about like macadamia nuts. When I was younger, shout out to my mom if she's listening to this. She probably will at some point. But like she would always have these like giant cans of macadamia nuts and just snack on them like all like that was her one snack whenever I was younger. And it's just so funny looking back now because I was like, she was probably eating hundreds upon hundreds of calories at a time, just like handfuls of macadamia nuts. But like to her at the time, it was quote unquote healthier. You know what I mean? Which again, we love a macadamia nut. They're so good. So
yeah.
so funny to
No,
think.
they are good.
Oh, love it. All right, Joey. And then just where can our audience find you? So what do you have going on if you want to plug anything? All things Joey.
Yeah, so you can find me on Instagram at Joey the Dietitian. You can find me on Facebook as Joey Gast, or we have a free Facebook group called Fat Loss Made Simple. So you can join that. I also have a podcast called Fit Take with Joey Gast. It's on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and I think that's everywhere where you can find me. But as far as
Awesome.
anything like going on, just continuing to serve my clients,
Yeah.
coach clients, help them improve their body, their life, and all of those areas. So,
Love
yeah,
it. Amazing. All right, you guys. Well, we will link all of that for Joey. Thank you so much again for coming on. And if this episode resonated with you, if you know someone who needs to hear it, share this with them. Please, please, please subscribe. We appreciate it so much. Leave us a 5-star rating and review. And go ahead and tag myself, Joey, the Not Your Quick Fix podcast. Share this on your socials. We will be back with y'all next week. Hopefully, Kylie is recovered by then. And we will talk with y'all next time. Bye.